Well, good afternoon. Glad to be with you again. And if we haven't met, my name is Pastor.Garrett. I work with John Knox Presbyterian Church. And I want to say again, thank you again for the combined service we had at the beginning of the month. Our church congregation loves to do that and appreciate the chance to do that together. So we're not just sharing a building. We really do feel like we're sharing ministry together, and glad to be with you. And so Pastor VJ asked me to come and share with you today. So my hope is that maybe some of the things that I say can help you and your relationship with God and with others. Before I start, let me pray. Dear God, thank you so much for your love for each of us, for the way that you work in our lives. And I do pray that you would use my words to help encourage and shape what we do, how we live for you. So may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So typically what I do at John Knox is, I use a PowerPoint, so I'm going to use that today, and hopefully it'll work, but, because the AV guys had to work extra hard last time because I had to tell them when to advance the slide, but hopefully this will work. But this morning I want to look at relationships and begin in the book of James, who speaks about what wisdom in relationships looks like. And sometimes we think of wisdom as things that we read in a book or old philosophers or literature, and we can find it there. But James looks at wisdom a little bit different. So it's not stuff that you find from a fortune cookie in a Chinese restaurant. It's things that are more dynamic as God works in our lives. And the reason that I'm bringing this up today is there seems to be a lot of conflict and tension, and it impacts everybody, especially in the United States, because we have an election coming up. And there are differences of opinion, sometimes very strong, and that can come into churches, it can come into workplaces, it can come into families. I know, some families, and my in-laws included, that, this is very tension-inducing events. And so, people are on edge, and it's not just politics, it's finances, it's job insecurity, it's challenges with school and all kinds of things, but it impacts how we relate with each other, and not just out there. It can also come and seep into the church as well. But James says this: if you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. So he says, if you're wise, it's not what you know, it's, how do you live? And the other aspect of that is, are you living with a sense of humility? Because I think that goes along with the wisdom of God. Because he goes on to say this: but if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. So he says the wisdom that you show is how you live, and is it humility? But the other side of it is, if you're selfish, you're ambitious, you're covering things up, that these are not God's kind of wisdom. So he's kind of saying, here's two ways to look at life, and I'm trying to help you understand what that is. So it continues on with what wisdom is. But wisdom from above is first of all pure, is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism. It is always sincere, and those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So I want to start with looking at some of these terms or descriptions of what James says wisdom is, and to help that become maybe a part of our life. And then we'll switch gears and look at, well, if things are difficult or we've not at peace with people, what do we do? And so we'll look at reconciliation. But first of all, let's look at James, and he says these things about what wisdom is. First of all, he says wisdom is pure. And so what does that mean? Part of the description or the definition of pure in this context is integrity. So it's pure is to be true, it's to be consistent and not deceitful or two-faced. Because if you're a person of integrity, of truth, what you see is what you get. And if I say something, then I'm going to speak pure words to you, and they're truthful words. I'm not trying to hide or to shield my true meaning. And so wisdom is one that is just open and honest. And we know that this is important in relationships because, if you're lying, if you're deceitful, people discover that pretty quickly. And it could be in a marriage, it could be in your family, it could be at your workplace. But relationships are built over time, and they're built on truth and being a person of integrity. And if someone says something or does something that breaks that trust, it takes time to rebuild that. And so James is saying, just live a life of integrity and in truth. And I've seen this in people that I know real close up that, sometimes they speak in a way that is sort of nebulous, and it's not always direct. And part of my being Asian is sometimes you don't want to be direct. You want to be a little bit obscure. And I found that as a pastor, that doesn't work very well, because if you say something and you make it broad so that people can say, well, why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't say that. I said this. That doesn't build trust in relationships. So I've had to learn, to say it as clearly as I can and not leave any wiggle room. Because sometimes if you say, well, I didn't say I'd get it done by this time, I just said I'd get it done in the future. And but they're assuming that's going to be sometime soon. So I have to be very careful with what I say, because it hurts the relationship that I have with people. And maybe you've seen that in yourself or with other people. They lie to you or they deceive you, and maybe not lie direct, but you can't trust them. And then that breaks down relationships. So Ephesians says this: stop telling lies and let us tell our neighbors the truth. So, and not just telling lies. Sometimes you don't have to say something to not be truthful. Sometimes you don't say something, and that's not being truthful, because if you don't say, hey, this is really true, then you can let people think the wrong thing. So not speaking can be just as deceitful as speaking a lie. So it's being honest and open and saying what needs to be said, so there's truth in the environment, and that with neighbors, family, the people you're around. So that's important. It says that God grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He is a shield to those who walk with integrity. So not only are you helping relationships, but if you're trying to be honest and open and a person of integrity, then you have God on your side, and God will help you in your life in ways that go beyond your being honest. That God can help shape things around you to honor the fact that you are being a person of integrity. So that's number one. The second way that he talks about wisdom is it's peace-loving. Blessed are the peacemakers. Do you know where that comes from? So yeah, Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. And so it's important for us to be that. This is from Proverbs, the message. It's a mark of good character to avert quarrels, but fools love to pick fights. So they're saying if you're wise and of good character, you're going to avoid a quarrel and a fight. But some people just love to start a fight or to pick on people or to push people in order for them to respond. And that's very much a part of our culture nowadays, that they're trying just to annoy you, to get you to respond, and they like that. And so we need to be aware of that. And we see a lot of that in politics, on Facebook, on the internet, and they call them trolls. Trolls are just trying to get a rise out of you, to get you to respond. So they'll say outrageous things, maybe things that aren't truthful, in order to kind of start a fight with you online or maybe, in person. And you may know people at your workplace or in your neighborhood who just like to cause trouble. And that's not a peace-loving or peace-making way to do that. And so, and don't you be that person that, likes to push people's buttons. Because, I think we sometimes know what will get somebody to react. And our call is to be someone who is not just peace-loving, but we're making peace where we are. Third thing he talks about is being gentle. And another word or another way of phrasing it is considerate. That to be gentle is to be someone who thinks about others. And in Philippians it says, let everyone see that you are considerate in all that you do. So being considerate is an important part, not just for you to care about others, but it's also to let other people see, hey, that was really considerate. He's helping, he's paying attention. She really noticed that. And she had the right thing to say or the right place, right time. And it's important, if we're to be wise in our relationships, to be that considerate person. And also, it's important that you be aware when you're on edge or when you are inconsiderate. And, there are certain times and places, or maybe you're just having a bad day. And so just be aware of that and to pray and ask God to help. And sometimes with my staff, I tell them, if you're having a bad day, let me know so I can be extra considerate. Because, sometimes we'll just say, hey, can you do this? Can you take care of this? And what about this? Or sometimes they'll joke around. But if they're having a bad day, you don't joke or you don't press on people in the same way. So I kind of say, let me know, because I want to be extra careful if, it's a hard day. And then I'll say the same thing. It's like, I had a really stressful morning. Even, coming here today, my wife's car battery, went out. The car wouldn't start, so we're trying to work on that. It is a hybrid. I have no idea, what to do when a hybrid battery dies. I know like a regular battery. so we'll have to deal with that tomorrow. But it was kind of like, okay, try to put all that frustration to the side and focus, this is the Lord's day and we'll take care of that tomorrow. And so hopefully that irritation that's waiting for me on Monday won't impact me today. And I like this. I don't know if you're hungry. Oh, let's see. It stopped. Let's see. Do we need to reset it? We're working. Oh, see, it's irritating. If you can't get it to work, I'll just have to go the old method. What do you think? Let's see if I can turn off, turn on. So we'll catch up. But so, like some people I know that when they're irritated, when they're hungry, and so let's see. I'm gonna apologize. It says, "I'm sorry for the unkind words I spoke out of hunger." And so there's like a term for that. It's called hangry. My wife gets hangry, and my son-in-law can get hangry because when they're hungry, their tolerance level goes way down and their stress level goes up. So I'm just aware, like in the morning, if we're doing something, if I'm hungry or not, it doesn't matter. I can just go and start the task. But if my wife's hungry, I don't know. We have to make sure we have a breakfast first and get that taken care of, and then we can move forward. So yeah, thanks. I'll just raise my hand when I'm ready. So next slide. Oh. What do you need to do? Will it go forward on the... So we might have to just, if there's a way to manually do that. So I'll just keep going. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Wow. Hey, great. Good job. I'm glad you could figure that out because I would have no idea. So the other term that James uses is wisdom is willing to yield to others. And 1 Corinthians says, love does not demand its own way. And that's a part of being wise. And so a couple of questions. Do you have to win every argument? And do you think you're always right? Or do you know someone who is, and if they're in this room, don't look at them, but sometimes you feel like, no, my way is the right way, and I got to make sure everybody agrees with me. And if you're that kind of person, then this may be a little bit tough, but yielding to others, even if you don't think they're doing the right thing, or if you're always needing to get your way, then you're not in this wisdom environment. So he's saying, if you are wise, yield to others. Love does not demand its own way. And Philippians says, don't look out for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. So, the question is, do you take an interest in others? And how much do you know about other people? Other coworkers, your kids, your spouse, those around you. And the way that you know about them is, to listen. If you're the one always talking, then you're not listening. If You let other people talk, and you listen, then you get to know about them. One of the best ways of being more aware of what's going on around you is to find out, what's happening in other people's lives. Ask your kids, how was your day? Was there anything that you are, proud of, or was there anything that was a little difficult? And then also, if you're asking those kind of questions, be willing to share, what was good in your life and maybe what was a challenge. But in order to take an interest in others, that means, really listening to them. And then number 5 is rich in mercy. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. That we can come to God with all of our mess-ups, with all the problems that we have, the things, our own brokenness, and God will receive us because of mercy, not because of what we've done, but His great mercy. And when we receive that mercy, then it's easier to give that mercy. If we haven't received it, if we don't feel the love of God, if we don't feel the mercy of God, that's where we need to start to really experience that. Then we can pass it on. For it says, be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So part of that is to receive the mercy of the Father so that we can pass it on to others. Love prospers when a fault is forgiven. And that shows mercy. But dwelling on it separates close friends. So you can provide mercy by giving forgiveness, or you can hang on to a hurt and not be merciful. And so mercy is not what is giving what is needed, not what's deserved. Because none of us deserves mercy, but we get it. And so when we give mercy, it's not because the person we're giving it to has earned it. It's just because it's a gift that we've received and we're passing it on. And so sometimes, even in our best intentions, that relationships are broken. Things happen. They've said something, we've said something, they've done something, we've done something, and the relationship is fractured. And so that moves us to, okay, what do we do? And so this whole idea of reconciliation is important because, at times, even the best relationships can be strained and hurt. And this is whether you're a Christian or not. And then it becomes up to us to work this out. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And this is a tough thing because, there are people that aren't very peaceful, and there's some people that don't want to be at peace. But it says as far as we can work it out, as far as you can do it, then you try to be at peace. And I like what it says here in Matthew. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. So for God, reconciliation is really important. But it's hard work to do that. And so 3 things why should you do this hard work. First, you do the hard work so that your relationship with God won't be hindered. You know these commands. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind and strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. So sometimes when we say, I love God, but, I don't love other people, I can't stand him. It's like, no, it goes together. Loving God and loving your neighbor, loving others, are not 2 separate things. These are both equally important in God's eyes. 1 John reminds us, it says, if someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people who we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? Well, that's kind of a challenging statement, because we all want to say, I love God. I can't stand him. But John says, no, if you can't stand this person, then you're really not able to love God either. So loving other people really impacts how you relate with God and live in the love of God. So it's important that we do this. And you do the work of reconciliation so your prayers will not be hindered. In 1 Peter it says, treat your wife with understanding as you live together. Treat her as you should so that your prayers will not be hindered. And so to me, it's an interesting dynamic that when we're not treating the people around us in a nice way, it impacts our prayer life. So again, it's like, you can't be praying and asking God to bless you if you're not loving your spouse, if you're not loving your family, if you're not trying to be at peace with other people, your prayers get impacted. And so God says it's important to deal with that. And then third, if you do the hard work of reconciliation, you do it so that your peace and your happiness won't be hindered. So it's up to you. When the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, he causes their enemies to be at peace with them. So that as we reconcile, you bless them, but you really bless yourself. It says, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. So it's important for us, here in the church or in our families, to not let that root of bitterness grow, because if we're not reconciled and we're not really caring for the people around us, then that becomes a source of bitterness, a sort of a poison, a toxin in our life. And you may know people who just won't let go of hurt, of bitterness, of people slighting them. I have a good friend who has trouble with her sister, and her sister did her wrong, and she says, I'll never forgive her. I'll if she comes and begs, maybe I will. But the one who's not forgiving, she's alone. She's cut herself off from family, and she's the one that's miserable. Her sister's doing fine. She's not doing fine because she's holding on to the hurt. So it's really important to not let toxins grow. So what do we need to do? What are some steps? Several things. First, pay attention. Pay attention to God and to your own feelings. And I like what I just read. If you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Then go and be reconciled, then come and offer your sacrifice. So it says, if you're at the altar in church, taking communion, and you suddenly remember someone has something against you. See, I think that's God kind of bringing that relationship to mind because he wants you to repair it, to fix it. That he's in the business of reconciliation and of unity. So if he's bringing something to mind, I think that's the Spirit of God kind of saying, hey, you need to take care of this. So if someone is coming to mind, even right now, don't just say, well, I hope I won't do anything and hopefully I'll forget. Like, if God's bringing someone to mind, do it, because what's more important, a relationship or worship? He's saying, leave worship, go reconcile, and then come back. So he's saying, just don't carry on with your churchy religious life. Deal with the relationships and then come back. So it's important to take the first step, that we don't wait for them. It says if you suddenly remember someone has something against you, you go. So sometimes we say, well, we have this broken relationship, but if they come to me, then I'll deal with it. But it says you go and take care of it if someone has something against you. So it's not just you having something against them. It's someone has something against you, you still go. So it's whether it's something on your mind or it's bothering them, either way, you go. And I have to say, it takes courage and commitment to do this because, broken relationships, those are hard to deal with. And maybe they've been broken for a while, or maybe the other person's, just, such a mean, terrible person, you don't want to deal with it. But sometimes God says, no, you go and take care of it. And it reminds me of when I was at a pool and they had a high dive and a low dive. And I don't know if any of you have been on one of those high dives. Like when I was down below, the board, it didn't look that high up. And but I went up the ladder and stood out at the end. It looked like it was 100 miles down to the water. And, I go, I don't want to do this. But I didn't go back down because there were people behind me, and some of them were little kids. And here's this adult, it would look terrible, or at least embarrassing for an adult to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Little kids are going up and jumping off. So my fear of embarrassment was bigger than my fear of jumping. But so I got up there and I jumped, and it wasn't as bad. And so I thought, well, I got to do this again. So, but instead of climbing up, going to the end, and then waiting and looking down, just went up, walked, and then just jumped again. I did give myself a chance to get scared. And so sometimes with doing the right thing, it may look scary, it may be scary, but you just go and you do it because it's the right thing. And for some of you, it's easy. For some of you, it's really difficult. But God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and love and self-discipline. That God will help you to overcome, your fear or your reluctance to go and to help move towards reconciliation. And it might help to remind you that you have blind spots. I have blind spots. I have things that I don't see. And I want to tell you that in a relationship that's tension or it's broken, you're not blameless. It could be 90% the other person, but it's still 10% yours. Or it could be 99%. It's still 1% something you're doing impacts that relationship. Because sometimes we say, well, I'm not going to deal with that. It's mainly their fault, so they have to deal with it. God is saying, no, it doesn't matter. A brokenness, you have some part to play. You have to go and deal with it. And Jesus said this, why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, hey, let me help you take that speck out of your eye when you can't get past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you'll see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. So we need to know we have blind spots, and because of that, we need to confess our own fault in the conflict. So instead of going to them and saying, hey, you messed up, you really made me mad, and you go and say, my tone of voice could have been better. And, I spoke before I thought. And even if it's 90% them, 10% me, I still go and I just say, I'm sorry, I messed up. And stop. Because if you say, I'm sorry, I messed up, I said the wrong thing, because you were such a jerk, or you did that and you ticked me off. No, that's not an apology. That's not reconciliation. It's to say, hey, this is my part, this is what I did, I'm sorry, and leave it at that. And so for some of you, make sure you pray, because it's all about humility. It's not about, just taking care of your part. It's about being gracious. And because of that, I think sometimes write out what you're going to say. When I've had to apologize to somebody that I didn't like, and it was mainly their fault, to write it out and to say the right words was very helpful, so that when I saw them and I spoke to them, the words were what I wanted them to be. No more, no less. And as you work towards reconciliation, listen for the hurt. You may have heard hurt people hurt people. So if someone is hurting you or hurting others, it comes out of their own hurt. And so that helps me to understand, if they're pushing me, not to react in a harsh way, because something is going on inside of them. And when you're working towards it, try to see their side, because you can see your side very clearly, but it's helpful to kind of listen for their point of view and what's going on in their life. Because, we both see things from our perspective, and they might see it one way and you might see it another. And so that coming together, looking for common ground is important. So you must first of all be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry. And I think listening is the best thing in relationships and in reconciliation. It opens up all kinds of doors. So we can listen too quickly and speak, or we can listen only so much and then we have to speak. Just focus in on listening. And so in reconciliation, we do this. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, and you must forgive others. And so it goes back that I think Jesus changes everything. That for me to look at my own faults, my own brokenness, helps me to live with, accept, build bridges with someone who is also broken, who is also hurtful. And God gave us this wonderful message of reconciliation. So that as Christ's ambassadors, God is making his appeal through us. So it's not just about you and them, it's about being a greater ambassador for Christ, because mercy and forgiveness and trying to see the other person's side, that's kind of very rare in our culture and society. So when you live this way, people, I think, take notice. And so, some of you need to step away from politics, from the computer, social media, combative friends, to get into a space where you can be wise in your relationships, work towards reconciliation, and make good choices, to know that it's important to do. And, staying close to Christ is, I think, the first place we got to be, because he wants relationships to work. He'll do things outside of your control, and he can move in other people's hearts, but he has to start in yours. And humility and a willingness to be merciful and to move towards reconciliation, even if it's difficult. God honors that. And he'll honor that in your life. He'll honor that here in our church. And he'll honor that wherever you go. So may God give you the strength and the willingness and the ability to be people who are wise. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you for the transforming work that you do in our lives and in this culture and in our workplaces and maybe in our homes. Sometimes it can be stressful and it can be difficult to live at peace. So I pray that by your Holy Spirit, you would use our time with you, reading scripture, praying, our time here in worship, and maybe just when you're with us throughout the day, may you continue to help us be people who show your mercy and goodwill and your love towards others. And may you be glorified in us, in our church, and in our world. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.